to note, and it's the whole thing of the case, is she's a public official, state official with DCYS, Department of Children and Youth and Family Services, formerly CPS. What is her title?
Child Welfare Area Administrator.
Child Welfare Area Administrator for the West Seattle, for King County, but she's specifically for the tribes too, Child Welfare.
Indian Child Welfare
Indian
Area.
Child Welfare Administrator. Yes, for the state agency. Okay.
Like I said, I take the initial intake, okay? Let it document the report, let's send you the links, put on all your stuff. Okay, you're telling me, for the camera here, briefly, about what happened, because follow-up is what happened to the detective.
Yes.
Not me.
Yes.
So I'm here to document your initial report. Okay, that's my job.
Yes.
Send you the links, attach your stuff. Okay?
Understood.
Then they reach out to you. I have no control.
No, I understand that. No, and listen,
That's what I want you to understand.
I do.
I don't have control.
Yeah, I understand.
I take the initial report.
It's going to the higher ups after you. I get it. And you're doing a very good, thorough job right now.
So, tell me.
Okay, so I know briefly, but you're going to have to pardon me because we've been tortured over this for 3 years. Everything's still well within the statute, so I'm going to give you a little background, but basically what I'm coming to here is from July on in court, skipping over months, and that'll be brief. But basically, it has all started back in 2020 when I was laid off from my union in June. I had health insurance from accrued hours until October of 2020. My wife is a CPS investigator, and you know how they work in homeless encampments and Seattle squalor and heroin addicts. We wanted to get my kids when my insurance expired on my wife's plan because they have pre-existing asthma. So 3 weeks before the transfer, my union business manager commits federal fraud and sends an email to my plan on the East Coast telling them that I've been suspended by the union when I was just laid off out of work. It was fraudulent. And there was a trial and stuff that would have to happen for me to be suspended. So he fraudulently just had them cut off my insurance. That correspondence, there was only 3 weeks left, so it was a big deal, was asked for, requested by the healthcare authority to see how my insurance company was insuring my kids. We gave that to them. There was fraud in that correspondence for how he cut it off, and it was a termination of benefits letter that confused the healthcare authorities to commit Class C felonies in judgments against us, denying my children, my minority children with asthma, health insurance for 15 months during the pandemic. So we dealt with this with the state, and they were all at home working, watching Pornhub. And so we went to file criminal reports against my business manager, reckless endangerment, and so just a few gross misdemeanors and stuff like that for what he started that caused 15 months of denials. So we came here, and one of your officers, I won't name him here, did a great job. He did a thorough report when I had a request to come to my union hall and take some information. Very good man. And then I called you guys back, and you didn't have a detective available at that time with public defunding for police officers, stuff like that, and they were breaking all your detectives down. What they did is okay. So anyway, he couldn't help me. You guys called me, said, "Damn, detective, reckless endangerment." They told me to go to my hometown. So we go to Ording Police. They had a hard time getting their attention. On the 5th time, they committed official misconduct against me and to tone that down so it was front of the clerks in the court and stuff in the municipality. They decided to take a look at our reports. So I showed them the evidence to the city council, and they gave me reports for my wife and children to fill out. I'd seen weird shit going on with these police. I just had the minorities fill it out. So they turned in their handwritten statements, and all the evidence, direct evidence, is our own medical information. So we had good direct evidence. So 2 weeks go by, we don't hear nothing. I talked to the detective once a week, and he couldn't remember the perpetrator's name or any of the facts, so it was like a non-investigation. September 28th, I went into Ording City Hall to file complaints or to complain, about non-investigation. So I chewed out the city council and the police. I left peaceably. Then I had to go to the school and talk to my principal, but my kids starting school without health insurance, even though their wives worked for the state, and I was harassed by the resource officer. Took all that together, went home, wrote complaints, returned them to Ording City Hall the next day. As the doors opened 9 o'clock, 2 police came around with a trespassing order in my own city hall and told me to sign it. Well, I refused. And at that point, because I was doing all the constitutional violations, I wasn't using, we wanted to keep the discrimination thing away. We wanted to do constitutional, but at that point we see discrimination. So I put my hands behind my back and yes. I know. Oh, trust me, this is absolutely necessary. It's all in here, and I appreciate it. So anyway, they arrest me when I put my hands back outside, second-degree trespassing. I go into municipal court because this is evidence against a lot of people. The next week for second-degree trespassing with no priors, right? So I get a public defender, and I go to give him my evidence, and he says I can't take it. And I'm like, why not? He's like, I can't take it. At the same time, ordering the municipality and police conceal all my wife and children's written reports, their existence on the planet, right? While I was there complaining. And then they ran me through this court process with no evidence and like just my story about the insurance conspiracy. So I fired my public defender, blah, blah, blah. And, told the judge I was defending myself pro se. He told me I couldn't. I told him I couldn't. I read the constitutional amendments for it. He told me to get a lawyer. He continued it. So I came back. I'm going pro se. So he ordered a mental health and competency evaluation to see if I have the capacity to stand trial, right? Through DSHS. And that was my wife's employer at the time that was refusing insurance to my kids, basically, according to their pandemic, they're genociding my children because, they were quarantined from their own mother for 6 months while she was assigned to Seattle field work. So anyway, so the judge asked for that and I declined. We were offended by that. And he sentenced me to jail for Nisqually jail with no priors for 30 days with a $50,000 cash bond to force me to have an evaluation with DSHS psychologist Leslie Pickett. So now 2022, I'm moving along the dial. I'm in jail in February, and February 1st, February 10th, I'm taken out of the population to have my evaluation on Zoom video with Dr. Leslie Pickett at Western Behavioral Health, Western State. So I gave her a synopsis, just like I did you right now, just like I'm doing you right now, where I was up to this point, man. She's giving me a mental health evaluation. And she accepted that, and she typed the deposition. And she said, well, I know I'm not going to give you the actual test. This is enough, and I can't get you out of there, but that's fine. And I went back into population. Immediately after the mental health capacity evaluation, Dr. Leslie Pickett calls my wife at a DCYF office immediately after. And then tells my wife confirms my story, but then she tells my wife I'm not going to pass the test. She says that it's not going to affect my career, so just let it go. Dr. Leslie Pickett threatened my wife from one agency to the other, right? No, this is evidence that needs to be heard. I have a right to do it, or we can start over with somebody else. So anyway, so I go back into the population. My wife texted me, told me how this crooked psychologist, what she was doing, acts of war against this terror. But anyway, so I go back into the population and get COVID, my 6th infection from the inmates, So I go into quarantine, and I'm in quarantine, and the guards come in. I'm in there 4 hours, a makeshift quarantine, freezing. Guards come in with DCR, Thurston County DCR, designation crisis response. And they're like, we're here to give you a mental health evaluation. I said, well, no, I had my mental health evaluation court order with Dr. Leslie Pickett. He's like, well, you got to take this one. I said, F off. No, I don't. He's like, well, if you take this test, I'll let you out right now. And I asked him if he had the paperwork to override a $50,000 cash bond. He's like, no, I don't. I don't have that with me. So the guards got suspicious of him and put me back in my cell. So you can go back in your cell. And then at 6 a.m. they came into my cell with a stretcher, with EMTs. Grabbed me, strapped me down like Hannibal Lecter, right? My ankles, my legs, my chest, my waist, my neck, my arms, and brought me in for civil commitment off of Indian land. I was lucky to make it out of there in one piece. But I did end up at St. Peter's Psychiatric Hospital, but I had to go through their ER first to get a health check before they civilly committed me. And the ER doctor knew I wasn't crazy. He fed me, let me sleep in a nice regular ER room and everything, and released me on my own recognizance 3 days later. So I get out of court, and I run back to my municipality to get, to continue the case, and they dismissed it. So so I couldn't appeal it, right? But I got the court records, and then I get behavioral health records from Dr. Leslie Pickett. She falsified it, took me out of context, completely. It was insane. But her very last line says, I do not recommend Mr. Conroy for a DCR evaluation. But I got the court records from Judge John Curry, Karen Lentz, prosecutor, and my public defender that I fired, all signing the order to have me DCR involuntary from quarantine in jail, checking the box that said the DCR, or the state competency evaluator said Mr. Conroy should have the evaluation. So they filed a false court order, which is a Class C felony. I did file charges on that judge and this thing, but they're trying to concealing shit in my hometown. But, basically right now I'm indicting everybody around my hometown. They're going to really get it. So anyway, so that's that. So I get out of jail, dust myself off, and this is June of 2022. I call Sergeant Ryan Walson of State Police Patrol in Tacoma. And I talked to him for 45 minutes and about this, that we're still after Patrick Strafer, because at this point we're still defending the state, right? You know, I mean, we're not charging anybody with the state. It was Patrick Strafer's fraud that did this to the state. So Sergeant Wilson sent me an email after our conversation immediately with the contact for a Washington State Patrol that works for DSHS down in the headquarters. And he said, great conversation, you know, I wish I could help you more, right? So I go down, that was June 10th on a Friday. On the 13th of June 2022, I go down there on a Monday. So I stop in DSHS headquarters, and there's still lockdown, you know, they're still playing pandemic, and state employees are ornery and stuff. They knew I didn't belong there, but I found myself walking backwards, you know, talking to them, and I was just tortured through DCRs and false arrests by municipality. So I left peaceably. Then I went to the healthcare authority. I was in there for 10 minutes. I went to the healthcare authority, talked to a social worker. She was in tears about the whole thing, but she had to call her supervisor. You know, the typical ornery DCS or state supervisor, scraggly hair, paisley shirt, wearing slacks with a mask in the front. Turns out to kind of spit me out of there. You know, you don't belong here. Every time I try to speak, she'd interrupt me, trying to agitate me. Because you know how, like, a public employee, they'll try to agitate you. If you say something, they can turn your back on you. But I know the whole scheme because, you know, I know everything about this government. So anyway, I left there, and I stopped at her headquarters at DCOI finally. Spoke to a security guard because the building was completely empty, and he just gave a deposition, written deposition. And he's just down there talking about his insurance. He's trying to get a perpetrator, but no one's cooperating. He doesn't want to have to go after state employees, criminally, you know. So I left, and that was the 13th. Healthcare authorities called me for the promotion I made down there, and told me they want to, you know, reimburse me for all my out-of-pocket stuff. And a lawyer, they couldn't believe what they were doing. So I declined that, but Dr. Leslie Pickett, Dr. Evil, the kids call her, who gave me the, you know, false report and threatened my wife, she heard I was down, right, down in Olympia. So she thought I was going after her. And so did her boss, because my wife used an email from Cynthia Blair showing that I didn't have insurance in June 2021, but we were using that email just for the timeline. Cynthia Blair wasn't culpable at all. But anyway, so Cynthia Blair and got together and they filed false police reports. And even in the police reports they submitted to me against court, the police say there's no actionable threat, you know. So what they did was they got a bunch of, probably about 150 state employees down in Olympia and all the agencies, all this chatter about me being insane, threatening their lives when I was down there, you know, and this is 2 days after the fact, right? And they got emails from attorneys from the healthcare authority and stuff saying, yeah, he said he was going to take Cynthia Blair out. Or, I've seen Mr. Conroy driving around Olympia angry, you know, real redundant stuff too, you know. I could have been listening to Metallica, but I wasn't even there, you know what I'm saying? So, all this bullshit, so they summoned me to court through civil anti-harassment orders, you know, because I didn't commit any crimes, and they used all their lies on two rigged judges, Mike Morgan and Allen, whatever her name is, okay? So what they did was, on June 29th, Dr. Leslie Pickett and Cynthia Blair had me in court June 29th in person for King County for Blair, and the very next day, because Dr. Leslie Pickett is a psychologist, but she falsifies court competency evaluations or social security, stuff like that for the state, and she loves to hurt people. But she does a lot of crooked stuff for judges, so she's able to do anything she wants, manipulate the court system. Case in point, two back days for me, in person for Blair, and Zoom video for her. What they were doing is they were asking for mental health evaluations, and they were asking for permanent orders and my guns. What they were trying to do with all this false narratives was to civilly commit me to make me disappear through fraud, perjury, and everything. So we're going to court for Cynthia Blair, and I call out the perjuries, you know, and the false petitions and the false swearing and everything in front of the judge. And then the judge realized that, you know, because the judges were ready to go to do this. They were ready to, because every single district judge is criminal. They were ready to do this, but when they realized, you know, I knew my rights, because they were pro tempting commissioners too, not real judges. So once they knew my rights, they kind of backed off and they curled up. So I asked them to, with crimes review of the district judge, to arrest these two officials, right, in each court case. And they told me that this is a civil case, not a criminal case. You know, even though you commit perjury, you can't commit perjury in civil court. You know, I mean, the whole world will come to an end because the lawsuits will be all fought. So, and then they told me they couldn't give me legal advice. And in that thing of crimes review of district judge, the judges made a team, so they don't have to. They opted, so I didn't complain about that. So the judges ended up giving them a 1-year order with no mental health evaluations. So Blair and Pickett got an order in July of 2022, both of them against me for 1 year. So we're like, okay, while we wait for that, we'll go after my union business manager. So we went to Tooele at the union meeting on September 19th, my children and my wife, and we passed out information like a packet about this size with police reports against Patrick Schaefer, the ones you see here that you guys knew nothing about. And to the union members in the parking lot, peacefully, discrimination, protests, but peaceful, just passing out felony information against somebody in my constituents. And it was well received. We got a lot of sympathy and stuff. But I had to go in the meeting because I'm the only member, so the meeting started, and I was there to tell all my members why my wife was passing on information. So I started to speak, and they wouldn't allow me to speak, and for some reason the president says, get him out of here. So, I'm not welcome. I've been tortured and falsely accused, so I'm always like ready to go, hey, I'm leaving, So I leave, right, and there's the main meeting room, and then into the lobby. I come to the threshold of the door, and union conductor says my name. I turn around and he gives me a double hand punch to the chest, where I go flailing backwards past my wife and kids in the lobby. Really, and it was a discrimination themed protest, peacefully making that assault to a hate crime. A felony hate crime. If it has anything to do with race or anything like that, and you're assaulted, that's it. Federally, you have to shoot somebody and kill them with a gun. There's not too much leeway there. So anyway, I found the two. And she was in contact with Patrick Schaefer. We have direct evidence of that. So Patrick Schaefer goes down, the union guy, and summons me to court for anti-harassment order. Asking for mental health evaluation. My gun says I have guns and I shouldn't, and all this stuff. So I go to court, and it's the same thing with the perjury. Call them out. My wife was there, my own family. We called them out. And the judge is like, well, this is a civil court. It doesn't apply. And a bunch of other frauds. I'm taking them all to federal court. In my brief, my conclusion of my brief, it's all the federal judges that I'm telling this judge I'm taking to court. Because this judge is going to be a witness, and so is the clerk, and federal court as we go through this court process in Superior Court. It's brilliant. There's nothing they can do. I got him in a barrel. So anyway, so the union meeting, so we go to court, and he gets it, but see, they forget about the appeals process, so I appealed it. Took him to court, Superior Court, proved my evidence with the judge. The judge didn't pull back the order. It was only 1 year, but they wanted to strike the attendance with all the evidence against him, and the judge did not, refuse to, and gave a big speech that I can take this basically criminally and use it. So I got to bring that back to you guys soon, because he's right over here. And the judge ruled that all my evidence is back and everything that we went against it. So I could have went and started working that with you in June 29th of 2023 when that case finished, because the judge gave me everything to indict about 15 union employees and even the president, but he's on the East Coast, but everybody here. So, but we decided to go after Blair because Blair's order in 2023 July expired. And since Blair got the order on her, my wife's been through 7 back-to-back termination reviews. The whole time they didn't put an order on us, right? So July 5th, the orders expired today. Me and my children, because they got claims against Blair too for a lot of stuff in here, we went down to her work, Indian Child Welfare in West Seattle. So now we're here. We're coming to the nitty-gritty. And thank you for your patience. Okay. So me and my children go to her work, Indian Child Welfare in West Seattle, and security was in the parking lot. We parked in the back of the parking lot, talked to security that we were here to file police reports against Cynthia Blair, and they walked us in, peacefully. And while we place a call to you guys to show up at the crime scene, we can file reports. Petitioning to the government is the First Amendment. It's a public building, my wife's workplace, and people wasn't there, we knew that. But we just wanted to file a report there. This discrimination thing against them, it's kind of like a protest. We're doing it on site, to show, to make it a little bit more, give a little bit more room. So the administration heard about it, told the security to ask us to leave, which we did. We went to West Seattle and filed the report, actually did. Me and my sons on camera for an hour against Cynthia Blair about her perjury, false for instrument defiling, Class C felony, false swearing, reckless endangerment, everything she did in court a year prior in the anti-harassment orders, right? That's why we filed the charge in West Seattle. Well, Cynthia Blair heard that we were down there filing charges against her, and she summoned us to court on July 6th for another anti-harassment order, right? Another one, right? Because I'm filing a petition to the government against her. Says I have guns. Says I've been diagnosed with mental illness. Both are false. I sold my guns back in January of 2022 before I decided I was going after the state, right? Because I know all about red flag laws. So, where was I?
There's a second anti-harassment order for
Okay,
Cynthia.
yeah, so she summons us to court at gunpoint again, and every time they do it, they send officers at gunpoint. to deliver their summons, to make me even more criminalized. Just like your sergeant did by sending me over to your crisis response. I've been tortured through that, by the way. It was the worst move he could have made. Anyway, so I'm summoned to court, and perjury, false written instruments, all that stuff. And we go to court. At that time, as soon as we got the summons on the 11th of July, my wife sent an email to all DC Laugh employees, the governor's office, with 13 attachments, the same stuff you're going to get, with a letter about the corruption. And there's at least 196 felonies against my wife and children. I got all those. I got like about 48 of these right now, these criminal sheets with different officials. So I'm in court. We go to court, and my wife sent the email out. We're in court, and then there's an email sent out by John Marsh, one of the regional administrators, Jan Lawler, about talking to Cynthia Blair, and they put out an active shooter alert and implementing active shooter protocols by putting armed security shoot to kill for the incident for me and my sons and going to file a report. It was very vague, so basically they put an active shooter report, shoot to kill, attempted murder, we're charging them with that because you can't sugarcoat it, right? And my children, right? So they put that against my kids, with very vague, very dangerous stuff, for filing the police report. So we go into court, and I talked to the judge, George Gibson, and I said perjury, false written instruments again, and I really went into depth. Judge wouldn't allow me to enter evidence. 6 times I tried to file with the clerks 3 days before, in time. They didn't allow me. No jury. They refused to give me a jury, which in all civil cases you can. And the judge 6 times during the trial, I talked about something. How about if I do electronic? How about if I do it? No, we got rolled. Any excuse. So anyway, the judge ruled with no evidence from Blair and didn't let me testify and gave Blair a permanent order. Again, and all these judges put third-party restrictions against my wife and children. That's a way to silence them, right? So I appealed to the court, and I got her in court now, and closing arguments are set for February 9th. In her brief, my brief, and in her reply brief, she nails 6, 7 points. Like, for example, she talks about, his insurance with the health care authority, his children were denied 15 months, but they filed the paperwork improperly, right? Now, I mean, you can at least admit there has to be something more than that, right? I mean, there's the Affordable Care Act, and there was the fraud, and they cited the fraud, and they got all these felonies against the health care authority, but she's covering for them, and there's other points, But the problem is this RCW. It says the Attorney General shall, which means must, also represent state and all officials, departments, boards, commissions, and agencies in the state courts. The only exception is if the prosecutor's handling the case, right? That the Attorney General doesn't have to. But any other type of legal case, legal situation, legal matter, but all courts, which is civil, right here, the Attorney General is the one that should have summoned me to court at gunpoint. The Attorney General is supposed to do this. But Blair just indicted about 50 people in 4 agencies in her 4-page reply brief. That's why the Attorney General is supposed to handle the cases, so non-bar attorneys like Cynthia Blair can't go in there and have the state just be sued to pieces. So right here, she's violating this law. You see? You understand? Okay. So she's violating this law by taking me to court with fraud and perjury, and that's why we went and filed the charges against Bob Ferguson. He probably doesn't even know, but it doesn't matter. Now he's culpable for this. The court case is already on. She committed all these crimes in court. It's in front of a judge. Bob Ferguson can't come in and stop it or anything. It's already going, So we went and filed that report against Bob Ferguson for this. Now, we have all these felonies and direct evidence and all that, and we'll get them on the PDF to match it with this. So right here, that's kind of where we're at. There's a little more things going on, but that's probably my brief. We can hold it right there. Okay. Yes, you did?